Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian. We're continuing with our top 10 lists, and today we're talking about some of my favorite single barrels, store picks, group picks, distillery releases of 2024. As I say in every video this year, pop up here if you want to check out my ground rules or kind of why I broke down what I did in these lists. It gives a little bit more information. Prior to lists, if you haven't watched it already, this is a unique list this year. Year over year, I have always looked forward to my single barrels list because while they are no way as easy to find individually as even like the rare and limited bottles because they're single bottle expressions, the goal for this list has always been that if these are good single barrels that I picked or someone released that you were able to find in certain markets, my hope is that a group that you are part of, a group or a channel that you follow, a store that is near you would have access to picks from places like these, and that you might be able to find more accessibly, incredibly drinking whiskeys throughout the year. Now, before we get too carried away, in the past, these lists have maybe been a bit more diverse in where they come from. Have been part of Louisville groups and helped pick with some groups and have picked them up from stores and whatnot. But for those who are not familiar, I do work with Seelbachs, and so I regularly am doing and picking barrels all throughout the year. So my pool of where these have come from has shrunk a bit. Just keep that in mind, but that's not necessarily to say anything, again, when my main goal is to say, check out these brands from a place that might be near you, and you might be able to find flavor profiles that are like the ones that hopefully I found in the single barrels that we have. If anything, it's made the list even harder to make this year because there are just so many good single barrels that we went through this year to pick from. And so I just want to try and find a snapshot of a myriad of them to bring to you all for this list. The thing that makes it weird this year is that I did make these all bourbons. However, as you've probably seen in the past lists already, that hasn't excluded me from putting single barrel expressions of things in those lists. Again, going back to one of my ground rules, whatever list I feel like it most appropriately fits in, that's where I decide to put it. These are the ones that I have rounded up for some of my single barrels and store picks for this year. Let's get started with a couple of honorable mentions. There was a great showing of whiskeys that had really quirky profiles. And so I'll just name a couple real quick, not necessarily highlighting all of them, but we did a chicken cock 6-year pick recently here towards the end of the year. But we did a chicken cock 6-year pick towards the end of the year. Really interesting, kind of mesquite yet sweet profile. I really enjoyed that one. We had a Nashville barrel company that we picked, 5-year Tennessee Kelvin barrel. So it had that kind of Kelvin deep char, interesting kind of profile to it. We called it bacon bits because it was this sweet smoky type profile as well. Really unique, but probably one of the most enjoyable expressions that I will mention in the honorable mentions. While I have you here, jump down below, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Help me continue to grow the channel in 2025. While you're doing it, let me know what your favorite single barrel distillery release pick has been in the year 2024. Happens to be this Nulu 8-year that we came out with. This Nulu 8-year single barrel was really enjoyable, quirky, smoky, kind of funky off profile. And Chase had messaged me and he said, I found a barrel, I have earmarked it for you. I went in, I tasted it, and I said, yeah, I gotta have it. This is just one of those barrels that I find so interesting. It's what keeps whiskey interesting for me when you can find these kind of quirky, fun profiles. I don't even remember if this is available still. I think it might actually be, but honorable mention I wanted to put, I really liked where I had placed. I did not put it in my end of the year blind because I couldn't find the sample. And so I feel good about the list in the top 10, so I'm going to leave this as an honorable mention. That is the Nulu 8-year. Another honorable mention happens to be our 11-year Nashville barrel company. This barrel 119 was such a big, spicy, kind of nutty old profile that I loved, and I really loved it when we picked it. We called this one OK Blake because there was a barrel I liked a little bit more than this one. And when I got this one, put it in the blind, had it, straight out of bottle, I was just surprised that it fell just outside of the list for us because I really loved this pour earlier in the year and I thought it was going to really hang. And honestly, it is one that I really enjoy tasting. It is a different type of profile. So if you are one that likes big, bold flavors, you kind of like maybe a nuttier profile, maybe you're more in the Booker's type of range, but you want good age as well, our Nashville Barrel Company, the 119 series that we had, it was 11-year bourbon, was a fantastic pick this year. Another honorable mention I will bring up, and honestly, I feel like sometimes I rule this differently year over year in the list, and this is the way I went this year. Coming in just outside of the 10th place was this 10-year-old Brook Hill. Now, this specific bottle that I'm holding is the Life of Lux bottle that we tried. We had this one. I thought maybe it could hold the place of the other one I wanted to talk about that I didn't have in the blind in consideration, but it was just outside of the top 10. The barrel specifically that I would be talking about is the Emerson Shotwell pick. Now, this is one that I did not put in this specific tasting, and it was only, I believe, a 42 bottle yield. We're talking about limited of limited of limited. It was a single barrel. Like, it's not it didn't really, it's hard. It didn't really make sense for me to put something like that seemed a little bit more on the niche side into the rare and limited, although there is going to be a limited rare single barrel list in my rare and limited list, so I feel like I'm kind of going back and forth on that particular ruling. However, do know that recalling the Emerson Shotwell Brook Hill quite possibly could be one of my favorite of these group pick single barrels that I had all year long. It had very dusty, like oak-like notes, really lazy kind of sweetness on the palate, dark fruits the way that I like them. It takes everything that is involved in the flavors of this Life of Lux one that has usually big cherry pie notes and caramels and nice presence of oak and chocolate and barrel char. These flavors I really, really like, and it does it in a dazzling, aromatic, like memorable way. So while I thought, just because of placement and what I had near me, that the Life of Lux could fit in, I know that the Emerson one outshines that. I thought about moving that just into the list further down anyway. I didn't super feel good about that. I do feel pretty good about the top 10, so that's in an honorable mention. That would be the Emerson Shotwell Release Brook Hill 10-year bourbon. Let's kick into number 10. Number 10 on my list of single barrels and picks of the year happens to be our Peerless High Rye pick. Now, I was super surprised that we got an opportunity to do this because the Peerless High Rye is my favorite recipe that Peerless makes. And I think what I like about that is it has these kind of Four Roses-like tendencies, good spice, and then all the other flavors kind of supporting that. The thing that I loved most about our pick was that it gave this kind of extra layer of leather and like in fullness that tasted more like a double oaked profile. So you have this really robust profile on top of the already enjoyable high rye bourbon profile, and it was just a delicious pick this year. I was fortunate to be able to have one of those, and from them winning, I want to say it's the American Institute Spirits something award, I thought I heard that means they were going to take barrels and continue to roll them into their batched high rye product and maybe not have them available as single barrels. So I don't think you're going to see very many of these single barrels come out for the high rye recipe. So if you see one, it's probably definitely worth grabbing. In 10th place as the Peerless High Rye Bourbon Seelbach pick. Coming in 9th place was a barrel that I tried the very, very beginning, I believe, of the year. And I noted it immediately saying, I think this one's going to go on and do well in the end of the year video. And it did. This is the Breaking Bourbon Pursuit Spirits, or Bourbon Pursuit, I should say. Seelbach's kind of collab. They have this kind of Breaking the Seal group where they kind of do some picks together. This is a 7-year wheated bourbon from Old Elk. I haven't had very many of the wheated bourbons from Old Elk, but from the other miscellaneous mash bills that I've had, Old Elk isn't really a brand I generally gravitate to. But when I tried this barrel, I said, this is a really, really enjoyable wheated bourbon. The nose had a little bit of lemon. It was a little bit sharp, but really nice honey notes as well. Dark fruits, big spice cake, oak bomb. I was just really pleased with this one. I love when I find wheateds. I generally am one, I feel like I've heard wheaters are supposed to be softer than general profiles because it doesn't have the rye presence, but I generally find that there is a spice that is different, but also very present to a lot of wheated profile bourbons. And I don't know if it's because of the age or what, but I feel like they still come with a whole bunch of spice. So when I find ones like this that are a little bit more on the sweeter side, but also still bringing some spice, they always stand out to me. Coming in 9th place, this Old Elk 7-year Wheated. Coming in 8th place is the most affordable bottle that you would find on this list. It comes from a place that if you follow any of my content, you know that I love going to, and it's a bottle that I always recommend to people. Maybe not this specific pick, but I always recommend people find this and maybe put these in your collection. This is Blue Note Juke Joint. This is a 4-barrel blend that we did for Seelbach. And what I loved about this versus the single barrels, as much as I love the single barrels, they kind of lean into their own profiles a little bit, maybe a little bit sweeter, a little bit more snickerdoodle-like or whatever. But when we get a chance to do the blends, I feel like it's allowing it to nuance all the flavors. I am more of like a blended kind of person. For that reason, I mean, this technically shouldn't be in the single barrels list, but since it's single barrels and picks, that's the reason why I'm putting this in here. And because regardless of this particular bourbon, I mean, I got a shelf over here, 15 of these things. I love them. They're about $45, $50, $55, something like that for cask strength Kentucky bourbon. And I feel like, yeah, maybe it's a little rough around the edges, maybe a little brash depending on the bottle, but a super good value for someone who wants cask strength Kentucky bourbon. Almost fruitcake-like, a little dry on the nose, purple fruits, but the palate has really nice oak, chocolate, dark fruits, some big spice to it as well, but it's not unenjoyable spice. I feel like this is just a nice compliment. This is what I usually tell people is like a Stag Junior. Don't go in to think like, hey, this is going to go necessarily head-to-head with Stag Junior. I think there's more age generally to those that this just can't compete with, but it's like a Stag Junior. If you think of Stag Junior as a step down from Stag, think about this as being a step down from Stag Junior. If you've not tried one of these, I really suggest you do. You're not going to be out a whole lot of money, and I really hope that you would enjoy the flavor in this. So this is coming in number 8th place, Blue Note Juke Joint. Coming in 7th place was another one I have been eyeing all year long. When I got a chance to try this one, this was a single barrel that was sent to us, but we did not get the full single barrel. It's not necessarily a single barrel that we picked, but it was a single barrel. And as soon as we tried this one, I remember reaching back out to the guy from the company and saying, do you have more in this run? I just really love this flavor profile. This happens to be barrel 1661 from Circle City. This is a 7.5-year-old MGP. I know there's a lot of people who kind of immediately tune out to MGP, and I'm thankful for the job that I have because I have been able to taste so many varying levels of MGP this year, and there are definitely some that kind of just check the box of kind of classic MGP, and I feel like there's some that have been a little bit more. And that's what I love about what I get to do is because when I'm able to notice some of the barrels that I feel like are a little bit more, I try and tell you all about those barrels that are a little bit more. And this was one of my favorite MGP barrels that we tried this year. I mean, nuanced spice, big creaminess, a lot of caramel sauce on the nose. Had a coating mouthfeel, dark berries, big spice, kiss of leather and oak. I mean, it was just a beautifully well done Indiana bourbon. And it just let me see that not all Indiana whiskeys are equal. Glad to have this one in the list. At number 7, this is 1661, 7.5-year-old MGP from Circle City. Now, we picked a number of these this year, but I know that they're popular among a lot of people, especially if you're one who follows the brand. Coming in 6th place was this 32 series Nashville Barrel Company bourbon that we did. This is a 7-year-old. This was bottled just before it turned 8. That helped us keep the price down a little bit, but we also followed up with doing 2 more 8-year picks. All of them are phenomenal. I didn't want to put all of them in the tasting, but I did kind of like taste through some of them together. Man, they're just so good. These are MGP bourbons, Kelvin barrel MGP bourbons. And if you know anything about that, if you know anything about these 32 or the 33s or whatever, the run from Nashville Barrel Company, you know you get these deep, intense, unique profiles to the whiskey that taste much more mature and coating and viscous and rich than other products. This barrel specifically of the ones that we picked, I love so much because it has this big, juicy, peachy type note on the nose and on the palate. But then it goes into the most classic profile I feel like I noticed in all these, which is this kind of deep, charred marshmallow type creaminess. The creaminess is just unlike a lot of other pours, but still having candy sweetness, having these kind of coffee and oak note support. It's just really, really delicious. 6th place this year, this Kelvin finished Nashville Barrel Company. This was 3200. This is 3243. I really did enjoy all 5 of these releases that came into the top, but what came in 5th place was another wild card that my buddy Nick put into the blinds that I didn't see coming. And to jump into 5th place was really, really enjoyable. 5th place, we have this 10-year single barrel Penelope estate collection. He grabbed this while he was down in Texas for the holidays. So this one is the 21% rye mash bill. For anyone curious, this is barrel PEN 2455. I think maybe the most surprising thing about this one is that it had, while maybe being overall more crowd-pleasing, easier to drink, it still stood up to so many of these other pours, cask strength pours even, and this is 98 proof. It had a lot of melon and fruit candy-like notes on the nose, and kind of continued with that on the palate. It had a little bit of the old age coming out in a really balanced, approachable way with a lot of vanilla and a lot of those same kind of melon-like notes on the nose. And I feel like that just made it a really easy drinking profile. I feel like all the barrels I have tried so far in the estate collection, the wheated 11-year, the 9-year, I feel like you might see some of those pop up in other lists because what they have been putting in this estate collection really is some of the best stuff I have tried from Penelope and very elegant things that I have tried coming out of Ross and Squibb. Coming in 5th place, that was this 10-year single barrel from Penelope Estate Collection. This barrel that came in 4th place was really funny for me because I feel like I had been like shouting to people, hey, buy this, it's a great value, it's a great bottle, and it just didn't have a good name recognition to it. Number 4 on my favorite single barrels of the year is this Jeppson's Bourbon. This was a 8-year pick that we did. When we tried these barrels, I asked Blake if we could just buy them all. Like, it had the flavors that I love. Yeah, I made a sticker for it that I guess I could probably show here really quickly if you have to pause it because I wasn't allowed to print it for it, but I called it King of Illinois because even though this also was MGP bourbon, I felt like it had all the types of flavors that I usually do look for in King of Kentucky. And obviously it still showed itself here in the blinds, coming in 4th place. Has this almost like mesquite touch, dark chocolate like thing going on. I think that's what kind of ties it into King of Kentucky a little bit. Nose, very, very good. Palate, wonderful. Spiced, but in a unique, complex way. Earl Grey a little bit, so it has these tea-like notes, and I feel like some of the King of Kentuckys have had that as well. This was just a really, really fun one for me, and one that as soon as we picked it, I knew this was going to be one I was going to keep coming back to through the year. That was, and again, it's like, this is the Malort company. I think people are like, why would I buy that? Surprising to me, and I feel like hopefully surprising to people who picked this one up. This is our Jeppson's 8-year bourbon. This barrel in 3rd place, I felt like I called it from the very beginning. I feel like it is easy to pinpoint if you know what you're looking for, but the fact that it got to 3rd place, I think is a huge testament. This was our Jimmy Red bourbon single barrel that I picked when I was in Charleston. I was able to taste a whole bunch of samples when I was at Highwire, and there were some of the younger ones, and then I had the option for this older Jimmy Red, and I remember tasting it and saying, this has a profile that reminds me of a dusty bourbon mixed with this custardy, vanilla-like thing that I love about the Jimmy Red. The most unique thing about this bottle and where it placed in the list for me is that this is craft distilled. This is 100% Jimmy Red corn, and just has an outstanding complex flavor profile. Deep, rich brown sugar, kind of charred sugar notes on the nose. Has these candy, medicinal, funky, perfume-like notes that maybe even you kind of pick up in wild turkey, kind of funkier wild turkey-like fruit notes here with this sugary but solid rounded oak presence to it. Even at 6 years old, but then it moved on with this kind of really creamy marshmallowy linger. And then once it was revealed, I'm like, well, that makes sense. Jimmy Red, that kind of has that big custardy vanilla profile. But I feel like there's just a depth and complexity to this single barrel. I hope we get to see more of their age stuff continue to come out to market. I think it's some of the best stuff in craft, and it just really outshined so many things on the table. 3rd place, this Jimmy Red 6-year Seelbach single barrel. The bottle in 2nd place is one that I said when I first tried it, this might be my favorite bourbon I had tried all year. And I knew that was a big statement because I had tried a lot then, and there was a lot still to try. Coming in 2nd place on my top single barrels and picks list is this Altshuler 12-year. This is barrel 22E. This is everything I love in bourbon. When I step outside, I feel like it it amplifies everything too, but it's perfumey, it's dusty, it's oaky, it's complex, it's like that kind of lazy, easy, leathery type profile that I just love so much. So if that's kind of your jam, be on the lookout for these 12-year Altschulers. I feel like from their website or our website or other websites, I see these pop up pretty frequently. And another time, this could be one, this should be one. If there was a tie for first place, this and the next barrel would like have it. I feel like the separation between these two point-wise is so small, but this is just such a fantastic bourbon. It very easily could be my bourbon of the year. If I want to take out of consideration some of these harder to get things that I did get a chance to try, if you just wanted to go for like a generally accessible, single barrel, whatever, this is a fantastic pick. That said, I think the only thing that separated this from what bottle is in first place is that you can generally find 12-year, well-aged Indiana barrels. Maybe not just like this, but they're more readily available in the market, even as more of these single barrels come out, than the bottle that's in first place. But I don't want to discredit this. Fantastic whiskey. In second place, my top single barrels list is Altschuler 12-year. Coming in at first place on my top picks and single barrels list, and if I recall correctly, this brand took first place for a completely different reason last year. This is the Pursuit Spirits episode 63, 7-year Tennessee bourbon. Now, this barrel was a distillery release only at Pursuit Spirits, but the flavors of this, for the price that this bottle was, for the availability this bottle was, is insane. I have never had a more Dr. Peppery, cherry, cola, brown sugar, oak, rich bomb like I've had in this barrel. I feel like not only is that a crowd-pleasing flavor pocket, it's like something I feel like a lot of bourbon drinkers, or if you brought a bourbon to share with people, they would find this really, really enjoyable, but yet fun, sweet, familiar flavors. But the fact that they're highlighting the 7-year Tennessee whiskey, when so many people are, aside from the Jack Daniel's products, are talking about what good comes out of Tennessee, then you have this 116 proof banger that just says, hey, there is fantastic flavor coming out of Tennessee. And I'm excited to continue to see more things like this release. These are the types of things that get me excited about bourbon. These are the types of things that get me excited about whiskey, is finding flavors like this, especially given that this was like a $70, $80 bottle or whatever. This was a truly delicious whiskey this year. My number one picks and single barrels of the list, Pursuit Series, episode 63. That's it for my picks and single barrels list this year, guys. Hope it was insightful, informational. That's all for me today. Check back in the next couple of days. We're going to have another top 10 video ready for you all. Till next time, everybody, we'll see you all later.